pleasure to present the next session, which is What's on the Horizon, which is a selection of short presentations, 5-minute presentation with about 5 minutes for discussion, so 10 minutes on each topic. And I'm going to keep time just to keep us moving through the session. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark to begin us. How it will work.
Thank you. In 2025, I keep on thinking in 25 years' time, but it's not. But some of us have been around for 25 years, and it is 25 years since I started working in a library. And as you'll know, thank you. As you know, if you do cast your mind back 25 years, our workspaces were fairly different from what they are now, if you think about it. Some of you may have been in the cradle 25 years ago. So. But anyway, I work these days as a Facilities Planning Coordinator. It's FPC for short. Could be Family Planning Clinic. But anyway, Facilities Planning Coordinator for the University Library at Otago. I've been in that role for 3 years. And this short presentation was brought to my attention recently. How it will work in 2025. It's actually put together by Cliff Kwan, and it's a year out of date, but that's okay, as you see. So anyway, it's been noted, we don't work in the same way as we did 25 years ago or 150 years ago, but none of us were around then, so we'll stick to 25 years ago. And as the way we work has changed, so too has the design of workspaces. The last 20 years in particular have brought about quite a sea change, and rather than simply typing at a computer all day or at a typewriter all day, which some of you may have done 25 years ago, the workaday ideal involves quite often meetings, brainstorming sessions, workshops, and so forth. So a lounge might be every bit as productive as a cubicle, and that lesson has been embraced in some places by dot-coms and ad agencies. And here's an interesting illustration in a large corporate facility of a range of meeting spaces that actually jut out into this large open space. Have to have a head for heights. So there's another vision primed for mainstream offices, the mobile office, where no one gets an assigned seat and anyone can choose a different work environment every day. LA-based Clive Wilkinson Architects recently completed a 3,000-person mobile office project in Sydney for the financial giant Macquarie Group. Wilkinson spoke with Fast Company about why mobile offices work and why they fail. Rather interesting building. As a project architect for Frank Gehry, Wilkinson worked on one of the earliest versions of the mobile office, the Chiat Day, in the early 1990s, and that's pictured here. Each day employees checked out a phone and a power book at the concierge and then scrambled to find one of the few available seats. Despite J. Chiat's bold vision, it was a fiasco. Employees, reliant on paper, used their cars basically as filing cabinets. Executives commandeered conference rooms as offices, and if you didn't get to work early enough, you didn't get a seat. J. Chiat finally gave up on the experiment after 4 years. So much for that. He said, we didn't understand everything it took to make it work, and the state of technology was fairly unevolved. Now, the Macquarie Office is a far different story. Since opening in October 2009, the new arrangement has yielded over 90% employee satisfaction. So what's the difference? When you give up a permanent seat, you give up a nest. A mobile office design has to give something back in return. That's the key. Wilkinson has worked closely with Beldoen & Co, a Dutch office design consulting firm that advocates activity-based working. They've created over 10 different sorts of working environments, from high-walled cubicles for writing reports, to one-on-one meeting rooms for intense collaboration, to big comfortable lounges for group projects. Mobile offices are up in several places in the world now. Firms that use them include Interpolis, the Dutch insurance giant, Nokia, and Accenture, the tech consulting firm. The primary draw is economic. On any given day, only 40 to 50% of a typical office is filled due to sickness, or travel, or vacation, or courses. That translates to wasted money on real estate. Macquarie realised they could scale back the office size but build a better office, says Wilkinson. Now, some of you might recognise this. This is a bit more local. This is actually a photograph taken in the Central Library of the University of Otago near Christmas time, because you can see a Christmas tree in the background, but it is in the middle of the day and you can hardly see a soul. I didn't have to ask anybody to move. And that was another 2 minutes later, and I think there are 2 staff in the background talking to each other, and there might be some lending staff right over there in the distance. And that was upstairs in Information Resources, also early afternoon. And it's Paul, who sits in the front there, sits over here, but he was at lunch.
You were sort of taking it at a fair time.
That was very unfair of me, yes. So for 2 hours of the day, it can look fairly much like that. And on a Friday morning, it seems that every department in the University Library goes off and has meetings, departmental meetings. So those spaces you can walk in look deadly. That's very unfair of me, wasn't it? Just over 5 minutes, right, we're not far away from the end. The key, though, is that you have to build in lots of cushions, or cushion, shall we say, in case more people happen to show up on a day, and more importantly, to give people lots of freedom of choice. At Macquarie, 50% attendance translates to 85% occupancy in the new office environment. But the office isn't simply a jumble of dot-com-style playrooms. Everything is designed to be ergonomic. Something might look like a sofa, but the measurements are made for sitting up and working, and you can see that here in this illustration. And likewise here too. Actually it's a bit dark, but they're not very low, loungy seats that you can still get swallowed up in. And it's another illustration too. A couple of people working together. And then there's the future of the book, just like here. The office has numerous neighbourhoods, housing about 100 workers each. Meanwhile, each floor has plazas modelled on classic common spaces, ranging from playroom to coffee house to library, to this sort of environment of perhaps more of a garden environment. The building is, of course, exceptionally green. It uses about 50% of the energy of a similar building. Architecturally, Wilkinson says he's most proud of the transparency that makes every part of the office. 26 meeting pods float in mid-air around the 10-storey atrium. So there's plenty of natural light. So, final image. From any part of the building, a visitor can see the actual work of banking being done. This is a bank, bank. Transparency is contrary to the archetypical image of the bank. banks, at banks they're supposed to be fortified and immovable, says Wilkinson. That's finally being turned on its head. Here, radical transparency is a breakthrough. Clients can come in and actually experience the business. With all these factors, this is the most important project they've done to date. So that's something to make us all think about our prospective workspaces and what might confront us in the next decade, actually. So that's it. Discussion, 2 minutes.
So what type of library staff member could you see this being an option for?
Right. That's a good question. I knew it was going to be asked. Well, in actual fact, when you think about it, in perhaps the university library setting, we've already got the lending staff who actually move around quite a lot. And in our own situation, we do actually have some staff who share workspaces. So we're already actually verging on this sort of idea. And we are aware that some libraries in New Zealand already have such shared workspaces, so that staff do share a space, so that they don't actually assign them a computer and workstation for every position that that library has. So that's one area. It may be, I know that traditionally perhaps acquisitions and cataloguing departments have again assigned every person a space, but when one thinks of the tools that we have more and more available to us, it may be that area too might be revisited in due course. So there's 2 examples.
In brainstorming different topics we could actually discuss today, we came up with different ideas and then we sort of attached ourselves to particular concepts. And tomorrow we're going to have a session about ebooks and the different options you have for providing a service so people can access ebooks through the libraries. My interest is actually how are we producing books in the future, and then how do we locate those books when there's not new models but different models coming about that are beyond publishers. It's almost like the self-publishing model, but it's having a lot of formal structure to actually allow an output at the end that is of high quality. But then how as libraries do we find that material to provide that to our clients? So I thought I'd actually give you some ideas of some current models that are growing and developing, and then allow us to discuss what we think other options are from out of that. So I thought I'd get some other quotes that relate to publishing itself, and then especially love the one down the bottom. I maintain an ongoing survey of internet publishing and self-publishing, so it is now possible for any writer with a book to get it published at a nominal cost or free and to have it on sale as booksellers like Amazon.com. And so these 3 quotes are actually from authors that have been writing for at least 3 decades. So we've already mentioned Amazon, and they've created a create space self-publishing with us. So that idea that people are selling books and publishers are selling books via Amazon, while they're now actually offering writers the option to publish with them from beginning through to end, so that you know you have somewhere to actually sell your books when you achieve that. And then Lulu is another one I heard about from a Twitter conversation about 1.5 years ago, and there was a particular person that thought he wasn't selling his book. He just couldn't get that market to sell his novel. And someone through Twitter said, offer either ebook for free or for a small amount and see what happens. And so that's what he did. He used Lulu. He put up his book, sold it for a couple of dollars per book, and then it went up. All of a sudden, his ebook sales outstripped his hard copy sales, thus, though it did allow the hard copy to also be sold, and it became a marketing form. And this was the tool that he used for that. Open monograph press. Now this is a two-pronged slide. This is a software produced by a group in Canada, and it's an ongoing development where they've developed other things. They've developed open journal services, which has become quite known for open access journals. And they also went on and made an open conference system, and this is their third offering in that. And it allows you that whole process, like they do with the journal software, to put forward a book, have it reviewed within the system, and go through that whole process until the book is actually ready to be made available. And from that service, the most well-known press is AU Press in Canada. And they've got a small press where their model is for a nominal fee, they sell you the ebook, and then for a much greater fee, or even in some cases for free, you can go and download it for free. And then for the cost of binding it together and then sending it to you, that's where they make their money. So they're offering that service, and that's how they're making it sustainable. And to bring it more locally, and it's not just how the books will come to you, but what happens to the smaller publishers? What options do they have? MeBooks came into existence about a year ago now, and it was out of one of the staff from the New Zealand Electronic Tech Centre who went off and set up this company. And I've noticed every time I've gone back to the site, the offerings are increasing. And it's about enabling small publishers that are trying to produce New Zealand stories and put them out there, and giving them the technology they need to then provide it as an ebook and in multiple platforms. And so this is something that's happening locally that anyone can make use of. They even offered, because the reason why a lot of this was of interest to me is I'm looking at how to provide older books and transform that format so it can then be provided as an ebook. And so they've even offered the university, we could do this for you. And so it's how do we transform the traditional book and then put it out there as an ebook? And then how do we produce these books and then share them? So here are just some tools I know about. So I'd be interested to hear if anyone knows about any other tools or any other thoughts about this.
Hi there, there must be a bit of synergy on this because I just finished reading my Vanity Fair from my local Wanaka library, and there's a whole huge in-depth look at the traditional publishing model based on a book called The Art of Fielding, which took the writer 10 years to actually write, and it's written by his friend who's seen the writer go through all these stages and then finally find a publisher, and it describes the traditional publishing model and how that is now in this changing environment. So this is really interesting to think about it in a New Zealand context. I wasn't aware of MeBooks, I'd heard of Lulu and other models, but that's just seeing that it's a reality now. And how will this be sustainable for the publishers if they don't adopt an e-version model as well. So anyway, that's just an observation. If anyone wants to read that story, it's a fantastic story. And the book sounds great, The Art of Fielding, so there you go.
I might get you to write down that for me later, and I'll look it up later. Yeah. Because it is an interesting thing to what business model will exist to support this and to support the creative endeavour of writers.
How do you see this impacting on local bookstores, like the UBS or Wickles?
Well, it hasn't been good so far. So how do I politely respond to this? businesses change. And I'm not saying I would like to see businesses disappear, but then in the case of UBS, the University Bookshop, I can't see those types of bookshops disappearing anytime soon, because e-books are not at that point of completely replacing, and you've still got generations that can't imagine swapping, and so it's not going to, you've got to be more specialised. And I know of bookshops that are specialised and have that market, but what's the reality for authors? How will they make a living? What can they do to support themselves to keep creating? I mean, we had a whole session on copyright earlier, and that's part of what copyright's supposed to be about, of supporting, finding ways to protect and support. So, unfortunately, yes, I do see big chains of bookshops disappearing, but then there are others that are adapting. Amazon's been challenged by a company in the UK called the Book Depository, because they don't charge you for mail, so you can basically pay the cost, which is cheaper, I have to say, on a quick evaluation. So it's just finding new business models to meet, and things will, like with any change of technology, things will just disappear if they don't find a niche.
I was whispering, I'm sorry. I think Amazon's just bought the Book Depository out. So,
that's the way they deal with it. Yeah, and we're waiting for them to start charging for delivery.
Well then, I'm glad I didn't rely on the Book Depository too much.
sorry guys.
I think you mentioned this at the start, Alison, how universities or other libraries really are going to track those other means of publication and to supplement collections or whatever. Have you had any thoughts on that?
Recommendations. I don't actually have a solution for that. I guess that's why I'm asking you, the audience, that may work in those areas. Because of that fact, you may miss things. And it's just then supporting and then promoting to other libraries, hey, I've found this self-published book from the UK or by Me Books, you should get it too. Sorry, aren't you, Paul?
I know there's a company in England called Authors Online, and they sound very like AU, the Canadian one, and everything that they publish, or everything that's published by them, copy has to go to the British Library, and so that's the way of tracking it. So I would think there's similar things in every country.
Yeah, I've actually had that thought while I was preparing this, was actually, now how are we going to do that national legal requirement? If something's published, it must go to the national, will that continue to happen? And so it's glad to see that there are models already existing.
While I was at conference, I was sent an email and asked to talk on primary sources. Now, on a few queries, no one knew what I was actually supposed to talk on, but while at conference, there was a session on linked data, and actually fell into this category. So we're about to have a rehash of a conference session. And my thanks to Karen Coyle for this presentation. Her presentation was on the future of the library metadata, and basically she was saying that our library catalogue cards and records, whatever, are really a secret language of twins that no one else understands except librarians. How many people know what that means? Paul?
Yeah, I know what it means.
The front row does.
But within library records there are some good things like controlled headings, classification schemes. Keyword searching really depends on the skills of the user, but you can't search concepts and you can't navigate broader terms. There are some changes coming on. Federalisation is bringing library data into new formats and new functionality. And the other thing that she spoke on was this linked data and the semantic web. And this is the new semantic web and linked data. and you can't actually see it, but each of these little circles is actually a set of data, and you can, from here you can actually link to those. And basically most of the web today comes to us in the shape of web pages. There are links, they're all HTML links, and basically you link through to something else, link through to something else. This new Semitic web is Web3 web technology, and basically you're taking raw data, you're using something like BitTorrent, basically an index, and linking out. And so basically it's almost like indexing everything that's out there and providing a link. I can see some puzzled. So how's it going to work? Basically we're talking about raw data here, and already there is library raw data out there. We have our subject headings, we have marked records, we have all this sort of data that is there, just waiting to be used in other formats. There were 5 principles of library linked data, that we're talking about data, not text. They're identifier for things, it's machine readable, and machine readable schemes and lists, and it's all open access on the web. So in effect, we have something like a book by Melville, and he wrote Moby Dick, and it's published by, and it's adapted by. And each of these is actually a separate source of data, and it's all pulled together into one record. So the Open Library is using something similar. So in effect, this has pulled, we've done a search in Barbara Cartman, and it's pulled together all the information that's available out there on the web together into one record. And so what happens is that you can click on any of these. This is subject heading on love, so it's brought up all these other books on love, and you can actually click immediately into those books. And you can see the publishing history there, which is coming from the publishers. There's people, places, subjects, all of those, and you can just link directly out to them. And basically each of them becomes a separate page. So here we have biographical information. This is World Cat Identities, which I think is in beta, yes. But all of these are actually raw data all over the world. And basically the LIANZA presentation is supposed to go up on Karen's website. It's not there yet. And the linked data site is there.
If you want to look at a good example of how data is being used in New Zealand, there's a competition called Mix and Mash, which some of you may have heard of. So the web address is mixandmash.org.nz. And take a look at that, because what they're doing is they're putting out data sets, local councils, etc., and then they're saying to developers, take our data and take the semantic information and repurpose it in a way that mashes things together. There's very good examples of what they've done. None of them spring to mind at the moment as I tell you that. But yeah, do check it out, because I think it's a good way of explaining how you can take data sets and repurpose it for good. Who's got a question? Jackie.
I went to that session. I went to that session in Wellington, and you've done the same thing as she did. What is verberisation? FBR. What does it stand for? Because I was sitting there going, I don't know what she means. And the only person who was beside me said, well, I'm a student, I've just studied it at Victoria, and I can't remember.
Paul.
Basically.
Functional bibliographic.
Functional requirements.
requirements for bibliographic records.
Functional requirements for bibliographic records is the answer. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right, there we go.
And it's supposed to make it easier for our customers to find.
It's supposed to bring like things together. So basically formats. I've seen it working, honest.
So it's become a word before we know what it means.
I think Verberisation it describes the way that items will be related to each other from a work, which will be the kind of idea of something, so Moby Dick, to a, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but a expression?
Yeah, basically if you look for Moby Dick, you'll get
every example of Moby Dick.
You'll get any poems about it, and so it's bringing together all those.
Exactly, and then if you look for the book of Moby Dick, you get the English version, the French version, the published one in America, and the British version.
And the opera and the, the musical.
So rather than having to know exactly which version of Moby Dick you want when you go on the catalogue, you'd be able to see them all linked together in one record and go from there, rather than having 30 different records to filter through.
It's got something to do with the fact that Mark is not relevant or becoming.
Marxism is showing its weaknesses. It's the amount of data. Yeah, there's a new version of Mark. Is it a new version of Mark is just out this week? Last week?
I think last week the Library of Congress just said they're calling together everyone to look at what is the new mark and how.
And it just came out last week.
Yeah, exactly. So it's the working party for the
So
future
their
of the carrier.
report just came out last week. I actually have a copy but haven't read it.
Okay, as Alison said, I'm going to possibly be a little bit controversial and pull you out of your comfort zones. And the reason why I decided to have a look at this topic is primarily what's happening currently in the UK, and you'll all be aware of what's happening there in terms of local authorities pulling funding from libraries on a large scale. And so this concept of social enterprise libraries is something that has been around for a little while and has been flirted with really in a theoretical form, I guess, for a wee while, but it is becoming reality in the United Kingdom, so it may become reality for us too. So, what are social enterprises? And I apologise for the very wordy slide, but there you go. Social enterprises are revenue-generating businesses with a twist. Whether operated by a non-profit organisation or by a for-profit company, a social enterprise has two goals: to achieve social, cultural, community, economic or environmental outcomes and to earn revenue. Now, problem is, in my rush to do this slideshow and to keep it nice and brief, I sort of lost who BC Centre is. But it is somewhere in Canada, take my word for it. The Centre for Social Enterprise definition, Centre for Social Enterprise have come up with their own sort of version of definitions. A social enterprise applies an entrepreneurial approach to addressing social issues and creating positive community change. It's owned at least in part by a non-profit organisation that is using entrepreneurial methods to accomplish social goals and providing its profits to its owners for use in continuing their core missions. It's a revenue-generating business with primarily social objectives, whose surpluses are reinvested for that purpose in the business or in the community. rather than being driven by the need to deliver profit to shareholders and owners. In the United Kingdom, they've come up with some definitions of their own. A social enterprise is defined as something having a social purpose or purposes, achieving the social purpose by, at least in part, engaging in trade in the marketplace, not distributing profits to individuals, holding assets and wealth in trust for community benefit, democratically involving members of the constituency in the governance of the organisation, and being independent organisations accountable to a defined constituency and to a wider community. So that's the sort of model that has been introduced in a number of parts of the UK for running their libraries, particularly urban community libraries. In Lewisham, which I'm reliably informed is somewhere in the general vicinity of London, but my geography of England is fairly vague. In Lewisham County, the management of 3 community libraries, Crofton Park, Grove Park and Sydenham, was handed to a company called Eco Community Systems, ECS, which is a local social enterprise that recycles computers, and the libraries were rechristened as community hubs. ECS donates 30% of the computers it recycles to needy individuals and community groups, and ploughs its profits into IT training and other social projects. The 3 libraries in Crofton Park, Grove Park and Sydenham are combining traditional book borrowing with a patchwork of income-generating activities, including IT and employment training, cafes, second-hand book sales, and the rental of community meeting space. They are overseen by community hub managers employed by ECS and helped by a pool of 120 volunteers. In Blackheath, the library was transferred in June, cut and paste there, to the premises of older people's charity Age Exchange, which now runs it. And the New Cross Library has been resurrected as New Cross People's Library by a group of volunteers who are running it on a trial basis with help from a community organisation called Bold Vision. Now, every one of those libraries, however many there are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, would have closed if it hadn't been for these social enterprise approaches to keeping them open. Research published by the Museums, Libraries and Archives Council shows that community managed libraries are increasingly becoming part of the fabric of England's library service, and that financial independence is a common characteristic of them. The research detailed 10 large-scale transfers of library services from local authorities, including in Buckinghamshire, Suffolk and Dorset, to community groups which were planned or underway. The plans could involve the transfer of up to half of the 275 libraries collectively owned by these councils. So, are the people of Lewisham happy with this model? I hear you ask. According to Taylor, who is the director of ECS, he says yes. There are more events and more activities happening in these buildings now, he says. People are coming up to me and saying, thank you so much. We're so happy that the building is not closed and we're still getting a service. Kath Dunbar, who was a vociferous opposer of council closures, is also quoted as saying, we're getting people more involved in the library who perhaps wouldn't have come in here before. It's becoming more of a community library without a doubt. I think the potential of what we can do is amazing. That's 5 minutes? Okay. One more. The Chestnut Center, which is also in the UK,
opened in May 2005, containing a nursery, community cafe, meeting space, IT suite, Kirklees neighbourhood housing, the police, 9 business units, employment support and family support workers. A library and information centre was a natural extension to the Chestnut Centre's role, offering a library service, free internet access, free access to all council services, council payments and inquiries, help with completing council forms and a reporting service for council services such as potholes and streetlights. Now, some of you already provide a service like that for your councils now, I know that. The centre is run by Fresh Horizons, a social enterprise company whose main remit is to improve the employment prospects of local people and lead on community cohesion and engagement activities. So, some ideas there. And I know that when I first read about this, my first reaction was shock, horror. But having had a wee look at it and seeing the sorts of things that are happening with social enterprise libraries, I'm beginning to change my mind a little bit, so I'd be interested to see what other people think.
I'm just wondering if this model, just an old model, rehash, going back to the F&E and the sort of libraries we had in the 19th century, to be honest.
It's not quite the same, Paul. It's a good point, though. It is different. The Athenaeum societies were quite an elite club, and I think the community, these initiatives are much more community-based and much more about the community and getting the community involved.
To commend you, Lorraine, for bringing that one up, and I was interested in it when I read it too and circulated it to a variety of people and thought about what it actually means. I think in one sense it's logical because it's for public librarians. It really encapsulates a lot of things that are happening in public libraries now. All those things that you mentioned, one or two of them are probably happening, but not all of them. Not all of them. Not in terms of the management and the structure, the ownership structure. But it is obviously a concern for librarians, I think, at any rate, in terms of the profession and what's going to happen to those people who arrive and don't want a class or assistance or something else, but just might want a book or information. And how's that going to go? Because I think those libraries are run by volunteers largely.
Yeah, there was a variety. Certainly, I think probably the majority of the ones, and I didn't do slides for all the ones I looked at, but the majority were run mainly by volunteers with maybe, if they were lucky, 1 or 2 professional librarians. But there were other models where there were a number of professional librarians employed as well. And in some of them the council continues to support the service by providing the book budget, but the rest is run by the social enterprise and things. So there are varying models.
Yeah, I read that thing that Mike sent to us, and it was quite interesting reading down underneath the forum that followed it and all the comments, and you got a lot of negative feedback from people who were using the libraries, and sort of the worry of the long-term planning, if the social enterprise fails or the volunteers don't turn up or the community doesn't support the library. And it just seemed like there was no, there's none of that local body or government mandate to, it's business as usual, and if business fails, well, the door's shut.
Yeah, good point. This, which I didn't get around to reading out because I got told I'd done my 5 minutes, but the final example, the Chestnut Center, they actually have a service level agreement in place between Fresh Horizons and the council to try and ensure a continuity of service.
So here we are in October 4th, and our goal in terms of the transition is to have the new integrated hardware library in place by the summer of 2012.
My grandfather and grandmother and my father were all librarians, and I grew up in the library as a physical space, and I'm in Widener, and I love this physical space. But I spend a great deal of my time in digital space, and that's where much of my work occurs now.
At this point, it seems that 1 in 3 requests for a vote involves helping helping someone get to the digital content built out?
Well, we've started in LIS working with libraries to collect born digital content that's quickly changing. But I think more and more content is going to be created and solely distributed in electronic means and not have an analog component.
You know, one of the great lessons we have learned from the history of books, which is a burgeoning field of study, is that one medium does not displace another. We've discovered fairly recently that publishing manuscripts, that is, manuscript editions, flourished long after Gutenberg.
And an old book, a unique book, a manuscript, is like a treasure chest. And inside you have no idea what you're going to find.
Election, and when MP3 started to show up, I thought, no, there's no way. I'm about as serious as it gets for collecting records and these sorts of things. But the truth of the matter is that storage is a burden, and I don't listen to any less music now than I did. I listen to more. But
digital media will never replace first-hand encounters with original works of art, books, or artifacts, but it can augment and enhance those encounters.
What we aspire to is that once you're in any space, virtual or physical, to do with the library, that you have access to everywhere else.
So part of our job is to get the undergraduates past the intimidation factor of this building and the entrance to it, to come in and see what they can find here.
So what do you use the library for?
I use the library mostly to study. Just a quiet place. It's not my room, usually cleaner.
Already we see people making use of library resources much more broadly across the university rather than coming to a central place. Doesn't mean that we don't need physical locations for libraries, but it does mean that the role of those physical locations will change.
So here you are studying outside, in the shadow of the library. Why aren't you in the library?
I'm not in the library because to be in the library you have to first swipe in, then find a seat when it's often crowded, and then on the way up there's a line to take your bags past security, so this is just a lot faster for me.
If I can get all this stuff online, why do I go to the library for it?
Well, so it depends what you mean by going to the library for it.
As well. A library may actually be the space on your computer, which is part of your laboratory notebook, and it's an integrated something in the way you do your research.
This means that the library itself will be, I think, a place that will be pulsating with energy and creativity. It won't be just a quiet study hall.
In 10 years, do you expect the physical library spaces to be quieter, louder?
Both.
I think the before and the after, as well as the during, are increasingly going to be part of the social dimension of libraries as institutions.
Yes, I think it's the So I think our jobs are going to be providing content information, but how it gets provided is going to keep changing. So I think the package in which we provide it isn't really important anymore.
My greatest fear as a librarian right now is that people will miss the really great stuff because the mediocre stuff is so easy to find.
In my conversations with faculty, there is a huge desire for a closer relationship to the libraries and also a huge respect.
Librarians have a sort of network of human expertise that should mirror the network of information that sits in the cloud.
Everything that we know about the institution and about how to answer questions and how to work with people who may not know exactly what it is that they're looking for.
At the law school, we have a little mantra that we teach our students when they first come in. And we tell them, don't waste any more than 5 minutes on anything. Come to us.
We're envisioning a gesture-based system where you can move through the universe, almost swim through it.
I see us making a transition into a community cloud that's unlike the current collective.
With linkable data, we have the ability to go from kind of silos of data that are housed, at each institution,
hopefully never go dead out.
Libraries participating more in the production of knowledge in addition to the dissemination of knowledge. So
Be more of a mirror to the community that's using it. So we're starting to do this here, but to reflect back how the community is engaging with it.
Because they could build a whole ecosystem of tools, of visualization tools, or different mashups that you can't even really imagine today.
Yeah. Librarians on the ground need 20% of their time to try new things. And librarians that are administering these librarians need to let go of 20% of what they call their own. That's right. Give up ground and then let's try new things.
And so I think the kinds of changes that will take place will mean that we will never be in sort of a steady state, but we will never be in this sort of, I think we won't be in this massive change environment we're in right now.
And I think people do fall in love with these libraries. And so there is this important affective, emotional component to how people do research and think about the opportunities here. Is this is a place where you can pursue literally any question. So to clarify my previous statement, I am still a big fan of the libraries and I'm already regretting graduating so that.
How long do we have to keep innovating?
Forever.